Welcome into another edition of the Stretch Big podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Bigelow. This episode's going to be a little different, not nearly as Nebraska centric, but with good reason, because I was joined by a very special guest, Tate Frazier from The Ringer. He's done a little bit of everything for The Ringer. He was originally Bill Simmons' producer when he first started up there. Launched, he had One Shining podcast with The Ringer with Mark Titus, and then him and Titus went to Fox. Now Tate is back at The Ringer, hosting one OSP, and doing some other stuff for The Ringer on their YouTube platform. But he's been a college basketball guy through and through. I've been listening to him do college basketball podcast content for a while now, back to when I was in high school. So this was really cool for me. It was awesome to connect with Tate, talk about some big picture college basketball storylines coming into the season. We bounced around a little bit: ACC, Big 12, Big 10, coaches, teams to watch, that sort of thing. Wanted to talk about the Big East, but we couldn't really quite get there. But this was recorded middle of last week, so I didn't think we were in a point to drop 2 pods a week yet. Maybe we'll be dropping 2 pods a week once we get to basketball season. But if we'll see how it goes. I didn't want to overload the people too much in one week with some scrimmage overreaction and then a big picture college basketball podcast. But this was really fun. It'll some things to watch, some things to look for, get you excited for the college basketball season. Tate even said a couple nice things about Nebraska, unprompted. He had some nice things to say about Fred Hoiberg, Bryce Williams, Nebraska. So at the least, you can listen for that. This season, the Stretch Big podcast is proudly presented by Bird Darts, and homegrown original Nebraska golf company, and the original premium pack of golf tees. If you're watching on YouTube, I've got one of them in my hand. Bird Darts was founded and started as the brainchild of one of the smartest people I know, one of my former coworkers on the basketball staff at Nebraska, Brett Sapp. And these are flying online. Bird Darts, they got the premium tees. You can get them in packs, or you can get them even in cartons. They've got the apparel. I've got the hat on right now, and it's really sleek, really well designed stuff. That's the first thing you notice is the packaging, really sleek and unique. And they even do custom packs. If you've got a company golf outing coming up, a scramble fundraiser you want to hand out some custom packs for, or even just a family outing you want to have as a keepsake for everyone on the course that day, it'll help amplify your event, amplify your brand, promo, retail. The possibilities are endless. Each of these packs, they have 18 bamboo tees, and they're where you need your tees to be on the course, in your pocket, in your hand, in the pack, not spread throughout your bag, not making a mess. You're not digging through random pockets in your golf bag looking for tees. They're right there with you. And if you're playing with strangers, they're sure to break the ice. A little icebreaker. You pull this out of your pocket, someone's going to ask where you got it. That's for sure. With any group, whether it's your family members, friends, or just strangers, because there was an extra spot and you decided to be the fourth with some randoms for a round of golf. Fall golf is one of my favorite guilty pleasures. I know it's getting cold outside, but I enjoy the fall golf. So get yourself some tees for the fall, or stock up for the spring. It's time to expect more from your golf tees. Join the flock today. Birddarts.com. Swing away. Really awesome moment for the podcast today. This is pretty cool for me. We've pushed this for like a month now, but we're making it happen one way or another. I've been listening to this guy's content since I really got into college basketball. So this is really cool for me to get to connect with Tate Frazier of The Ringer. You can hear him on One Shining podcast through The Ringer all throughout it's One Shining preview season on the pod. I've really enjoyed the preview episode coming in. But Tate, thanks for hopping on. Thanks for doing this, man.
Of course, man. I appreciate you, and I'm sorry I made you wait a month. I am not worth the wait. I next time I will make sure that I'm available and ready. And yeah, it's the best time of the year. Luckily for us, we get to watch some exhibition games, and we don't have to worry about secret scrimmages only. We got some actual basketball on our television screen, so it's the best time of year, and we're less than a month away. As John Rothstein, I'm sure, has the actual date, time, and down to the second. So if you want to get up to speed on that, but we're all locked in, and it's a good time of year, and I'm excited.
Yeah, that's the one. Everyone's reacting to this Twitter block thing right now, like how they're changing the block settings. That means I'm gonna have to see Rothstein's tweets again. That's going to be the biggest side effect of
Right.
that. for me. Is seeing those pop up on my timeline, but and it's not totally on you either. I thought going to Chicago for Big Ten basketball media day was going to be a worthwhile trip, and we don't need to talk about that. That was an experience to say the least. But like you said, it is the best time of year. It is scrimmage season in general, whether it is charity exhibition games, secret scrimmages where people are overreacting to
Oh
social
yeah.
media clips or box scores. The team that I cover, Nebraska, just did a public inter squad scrimmage in the arena that used to be their arena and is now where Nebraska volleyball plays. There's all sorts of ways to make scrimmage season happen. But like you said, we're a month out. College basketball is close. It's Ken Palm season. It's ranking
Yeah.
season. I think my favorite anecdote of this last couple weeks was the Evan Miyakawa Dan Hurley beef. Just out of nowhere from the clouds. I think one of the things that makes college basketball great is Ken Palm is a meteorology professor at Wyoming. Bart Torvik is a lawyer from Wisconsin, and Evan Miyakawa has, I'm pretty sure, a PhD or something pretty close to that in data and data science. And they just run these college basketball sites that the dorks like us can enjoy and
Yeah, right.
deep dive into. What did you think about that whole back and forth? And did you have thoughts on UConn, the two-time defending national champions, being number 8 in the preseason on Evan's site?
Well, I'll start with Evan. He's a good guy, and not in our verbiage of a good guy. He's actually a good guy, very nice, and does a lot of hard work. And like you said, crunches the numbers for everybody out there. So we appreciate Evan. We appreciate Torvik, and Torvik's now with the NCAA committee, so he's fully into the machine that is college basketball. So kudos to him. And then there's Kim Palm, who's really at the top. I call these guys the metrics media mafia. I think they needed to be in a mafia. They needed to have some sort of term where they could, be all together, join together. So for Evan's sake, I think it's a good thing because Dan Hurley, I talked to Luke Murray a little bit. They look for, slights. That's what they're like. Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan would make up these slights, and people are like, I never said that. Danny Ainge is like, I never said that we were going to win the series. Yet Michael Jordan has come up with this whole made up story in his head. I feel like that is Dan Hurley. That's UConn. Evan just happened to be the one that they go after this time. I mean, it's good for him. It's good for his site. You know what I mean? There's no bad press that's out there when you have engagement from the best coach in college basketball, arguably one of the best coaches that we have in the United States right now when you talk about Dan Hurley. So it was good for Evan as far as the engagement of it all. And as far as UConn, I've said it on the show, and I'm sure you've heard it. I am trying to placate everything that they want so that they don't have a chip on their shoulder. I am trying to get UConn to relax, enjoy the top of the mountain, enjoy the views, and not be so upset at everybody else. So I've put them at number 1. I will continue to put them at number 1. Dan Hurley will be number 1 on the characters that count in college basketball, right? I'm going to put them at number 1 at everything because I don't want to deal with the backlash, and I want them to finally get comfortable so somebody else maybe can unseat these guys because they're running a top shelf operation right now. But it's a win for Evan. It's a win for UConn to have people doubting them, and even the AP voters. And I saw Jimmy Dykes as well had his top 10 and didn't have UConn in the top 10. So Dan Hurley quote tweeted that as well with his head exploding. This is the best time of year. Dan Hurley is just trying to find people sliding him, and that's going to motivate his team. So that's where we are.
Absolutely. And I've been in lockstep with you. You've said it repeatedly that college sports needs characters, and Dan
Yeah.
Hurley is the greatest character we have right now in college basketball. And I've kind of tried to echo that sentiment around here this week because Nebraska's going to Indiana in football, and people are really rubbed the wrong way by Kurt Signetti and his brashness and how much he likes to talk. And I'm just like, college sports needs characters, man. Like
Of
we don't like
course.
like coaches can be robotic, they can be boring, they can be as bland as possible. And when there's guys like Hurley and like Signetti, I mean, I think that's better for the sports. And and especially around here too, I am in Omaha where Creighton and Dan Hurley's relationship is anything but smooth and positive. It's very not a lot of as they'd say, no love lost between Creighton and Danny Hurley. But that's something that I've been in lockstep with you on, throughout this UConn run is, yeah, it's not for everybody, but college sports definitely needs characters.
And I understand why people like Dan Hurley can rub people the wrong way, right? I mean, we all get that. He
Mhm.
is his own type of personality. But when you really peel back the layers of where it comes from, it's like this is the guy that his brother was the favorite child. His dad was the greatest coach in the state of New Jersey, right? Everyone else in his family has gotten all the accolades, gotten all the credit. And in the shadows, a monster was born. And that is the
Mhm.
Dan Hurley that we're seeing right now. And he's just reaping the benefits. I mean, he is an insane person. And I say that, and I've said that to him. I mean, he's a maniac in the best way possible. And I think Signetti's the same way, right? And their whole MO is basically like, we win. And, winners get to talk. That's how it's always been. I like results driven conversations, right? We live in a very potential driven world right now, especially when it comes to like NBA draft and NBA conversations, right? It's always about, wow, Wemby could be the best. So let's go ahead and put him in the top 10 in the NBA. And I'm not sure he's there right now, but because he can be, let's go ahead and get him there, right? It's all about potential. I'm results driven. Dan Hurley provides the results. Signetti is providing results, right now. And your guy Hoiberg, he's providing results starting last year. So I actually like Nebraska. And I feel like a lot of people, it's kind of weird in college basketball. We watch the tournament, we watch these teams play, and then we go to the offseason and it feels like we forget it. It's like, Men in Black. Like we all get like zapped and we all forgot what we just saw, right? Like all of a sudden Clemson's not going to be good, even though two of their best players are coming back. I know they're missing PJ Hall, but like same with Nebraska, Bryce Williams is coming back and you don't hear anybody really talking about this team. And I find that fascinating as well. But look, PR and off-season narrative work is something else. And I've learned watching Duke how it can work in wonderful ways. And I think I'm excited for the basketball because then it goes back to the results, and then we have more fun. And you're right, the characters are what we need, and we got a lot of them in college basketball, and a lot of good freshmen coming in as well.
Absolutely, and that was, honestly a perfect segue because I was obviously gonna
Love
ask you
that.
about Duke at some point, but you mentioned Nebraska and how people kinda got Men in Black zapped, and we don't need to go too in depth, but that's kind of how it felt at Big Ten Media Day. Like, they're picked tied for 12th in the Big Ten after they finished 3rd,
Crazy.
and Bryce Williams and, Juwan Gary, a Charlotte guy, Bryce, and Juwan
Yep.
Gary is from Columbia, 2 guys from your neck of the woods. They're just kinda like, we know last year wasn't a fluke. Like we lived it. We
Right.
did it. Like, yeah, we lost guys, but we're still here. Like, if you're gonna continue to doubt us, like that's on you. Like you would have never thought walking around the wonderful Rosemont Convention Center in Rosemont,
Mm.
Illinois, that Nebraska finished 3rd last year and they went to the NCAA tournament. They've still got a pretty good head coach who, and it's crazy to think that his last Iowa State team was 10 years ago now, but they're kind of just they're I think they're glad flying under the radar, and especially it probably helps that football's 5-1, and they're just like we're just waiting in the wings to see how it goes.
Yeah, Fred Hoiberg is one of the best like X and O's guys in college basketball, and just a really good basketball coach in general. And it's his 6th year, and he has talent. So I'm right there with you. I'm confused by how, but every single time, like I went back last year and looked at the preseason media polls of all the conferences, and obviously nobody knows anything, so you can't really go back and go ha ha and do the whole Simpsons thing. But
Yeah.
it is a little bit like that, where it's the prognostication is so far from the reality, and it's almost better to be under the radar. So I'm sure if you ask Hoiberg off the record, he's like, this is good for our team. I want these guys to have a chip on their shoulder. Same with Dan Hurley, as we talked about before. It's better to be the one that everyone's overlooking than the ones that everyone's is putting on a pedestal. I think if anything, and I talked about this on the preview, but if they go to back-to-back tournaments for the first time since '94, and they have a chance and they do end up winning their first tournament game, like it's going to be ridiculous when we look back and see that they were picked 12th in the new Big Ten. So I'm on the side of the Huskers with this.
Well, that's what people who are going to listen to this are going to really like to hear. They're going to really enjoy that, hearing that from you. But transition to some ACC stuff because you are an ACC
Yeah.
guy. You probably don't know this, but 2 guys who are going to be playing pretty significant roles in the ACC are both from Omaha, Nebraska, of all places, and they grew up playing youth basketball against each other. They've known each other since they were really young guys, and that is preseason ACC. He wasn't preseason player of the year, but he's preseason first team All ACC and Hunter Salas, and then Wisconsin transfer Chucky Hepburn at Louisville.
Yep.
When you look at the ACC, I love the stat that your guy Brian Ives shared about how many times Duke has been picked to win the ACC and how many
Crazy.
times they've actually won it. When you look at the ACC from top to bottom, Obviously, you've got the Duke machine at the front of it. We want to talk about PR and narratives and media and all of that. We'll hear plenty about how Cooper Flag should be in high school and all of that. But when you look at the ACC, what do you who's the first team you think that isn't getting talked about enough in the ACC? Because I think we know one team that's getting talked about maybe too much. And is there like a certain guy in the ACC? He can be a Tar Heel or he can not be a Tar Heel who you consider appointment, viewing.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think Clemson, I mentioned them before. I think Clemson should be preseason top 25. I'm not saying they should be top 10, top 15, but once you get into that 20 to 25 range, it's kind of who you favor, who you like, who you have a little bit of a bias for. I have a little bit of a bias for Clemson. I really like Chase Hunter. I think he's going to be first team all ACC caliber player this year. I think Ian Shefflin, the most improved player last year in the conference, is going to be even bigger for this team this year. And they got some nice, Zachary is a guy they brought over from Boston College, like just some nice pieces to come off the bench, stabilize some things, make it so Hunter doesn't have to do so much. Also, his brother Dylan Hunter, I think, will have a better year this year as well. So I really like Clemson. I think Virginia, they're always going to be in the mix when they got Tony Bennett. And Tony Bennett got really mad at me last year in January. I implied that maybe, that he may be looking at greener pastures to maybe get out of college basketball. I was smacked on the wrist about that. They get Kyle Guy on the staff now, which I think is a nice piece for them, kind of like the Marcus Page of their staff that North Carolina has. So I think Virginia is going to be really good. I think Clemson is going to be really good. And as far as appointment viewing, I'm going to go with Marcus Burton at Notre Dame. It's kind of funny to me how Shrewsbury was covered in the Big Ten versus how he's covered in the
Mhm.
ACC. In the Big Ten, it was just like, oh my God, what a wonder this man is. What an incredible coach. He's one of the best coaches in the game. He goes to Notre Dame, and it's like, I don't hear anything about Micah Shrewsbury. And that goes back to the PR of the whole situation. But Marcus Burton is a scorer. He's a firecracker. I mean, he's only 5'11", but he's fun to watch. He can make big time plays. And I feel like he's the kind of guy that can go into a Duke or a Carolina, one of those environments, maybe provide an upset, provide some sparks, and get people fired up. So those would be like the two teams, Virginia, Clemson, and then I think the guy is Marcus Burton.
Gotcha. And then Shrewsbury's been on a hell of a recruiting heater too. I think
Right.
it's
Come
pretty
on.
evident, pretty evident that he is convinced someone or multiple people with deep pockets of his vision for Notre Dame basketball with the heater that they've been on recently. And talking to people in Big Ten circles, they're like, he's the reason Purdue runs good offense. Like he brought
Right.
all the Brad Stevens stuff to Painter, and Painter never looked back, and that's why they've ran the offense that they do. He's thought of and as a great X's and O's coach, great offensive mind, and he's kind of, obviously year one where one of the best players on the team last year was his son, and his son will still have a big role this year in
Yep.
South Bend. But I think Micah Shrewsbury, he may not be on the fast track, but he's definitely on the rise to being in that top group of coaches in the sport. I think, and
Yeah,
people
he
are going to
could be a
start to
shocker
realize
to
that.
win ACC Coach of the Year, right? I mean, I
Definitely.
had Terrence Oglesby on, and we were going through the guys who could be on the list, and you get to Pat Kelsey, right? If Louisville has a major turnaround, obviously the narrative kind of plays into it. But if Shrewsbury has a good year and they're a tournament level, like right on the bubble level team, I mean, he will be in that conversation for sure.
Totally agree. And then one more ACC question. You're a Tar Heel through and through. You're a proud UNC alum, but you've got an interesting relationship with Wake Forest basketball. I've
Right.
enjoyed hearing your stories over time about going to the Skip Prosser camps, and when they had their heyday. When you were a little bit younger. Looking at Wake Forest now with Steve Forbes at the helm, they've had this run this last couple years of bringing in portal guards, Alondas Williams. Then Salas was their big get, last year, which was of quite a bit of local interest here, obviously. But going into what kind of seems like a pretty big year for them after missing the tournament last year, they bring a lot back. Good portal group, and then obviously Salas will get top billing. How do you feel about Coach Forbes and the Demon Deacons this year?
I just want them to get over the hump, and I feel like he's in the Seth Greenberg zone right now, which is like right on the cusp of the tournament every single year. And it's the will they, won't they? I thought they should have made it last year, but they didn't do themselves any favors at the end of the season, and that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. We saw that a lot with like Providence, right in the Big East. Like some of these teams that are just right there. You got bid stealers, obviously, that come into the conversation. Teams like NC State that take your spot, but they're a really talented group. I think Hunter Sallis is going to be in the conversation for ACC Player of the Year. I like Cam Hildreth as well as kind of like his Robin to Batman. Efton Reed is a former 5-star guy who's bounced around college basketball that I think will be good for them. I'm not the biggest Omaha Baloo guy, I'm not saying that he's going to be a world beater, but I joked on my show. I call Wake Forest Star Rescue, right? You go there, it's like bar rescue, but you go and somehow you just get your career back. And I feel like Omaha might be a guy that can go down to Wake Forest and have that happen for him. So, and Tyler Johnson is going to be one of the best point guards in the conference. And, I know they lost Boopy Miller, who's going to be at SMU, funny enough, in the ACC, going to be playing Wake Forest. So, some connective tissue there. But yeah, I mean, I have a soft spot, like you said, I have a soft spot for Wake Forest. I do pull for them. My aunt and uncle both went to Wake Forest. So, and I grew up, Justin Gray was my coach for 2 years at Skip Prosser's camp. Now Justin Gray coaching college basketball, moving up the ranks himself. I would argue that he is a better coach than JJ Redick, but that's a conversation for another day. But sorry, that was mean. I won't get on a tangent about that. But yeah, I really like this. I really like this Wake Forest team. I like their top 7 guys. If they can stay healthy, they should be a tournament team. They should be in that top 4, top 5 of the ACC. And like I said, I mean, Salas is one of those guys where if he has a big year, he has the measurables that NBA, scouts and GMs and presidents, and it's really just the owners. You can blame on
Yeah.
it's really the owners that like him. So the owners
Yeah.
will see a 6'5" guy that's averaging 22, 23 points a game and say, why don't we draft him? Why don't we give this guy a shot? So I think Salas will be in that conversation, and Hildreth had like some of those hiccup moments last year that I think I would call growing pains. And I feel like this year he's going to have some redemption moments. So, that's why I like Wake Forest. I feel like last year was a lesson learned, and this year they're going to be even better. So I like the Demon Deacons a lot.
I agree. So I can, I will, I'm making all these Omaha connections. You're learning all this
I
Omaha
love
stuff
it.
today.
I need this.
You're talking to a guy from Omaha, so you're learning about Omaha basketball.
Hey, I've
Um,
been to Omaha, by the way. I went to 2014. I covered Carolina baseball team out there. 2013, I should say, at
ooh,
the College World Series when UCLA won the national championship. I
hmm
was there covering it, and I will say I had a great time in Omaha. Beautiful baseball atmosphere and just a great time. So shout out to Omaha.
Gotcha. So for a couple straight years, I mentioned Chucky and Hunter. There
Hmm.
was a series of state championship games where on one side was Hunter Salas, who's at Wake now, St. Thomas, who is now just up the road from you at USC after shining at Northern Colorado, and then Jason Green, who will have a bigger role this year for Creighton.
One of
And then
my
on
favorite under the radar guys, by the way, on Creighton. And if you look at Torvik or any of these sites, they have him listed as like ninth, 10th guy. I don't buy it. I think Jason Green's gonna have a good year.
And then the other side was Hepburn, Frankie Fiddler, and
Ooh.
William Kyle III, who is going to be playing in the Big Ten this year as well at UCLA. So there was that much talent going up against each other in 2 consecutive Nebraska high school state title games, and only one guy wound up playing at one of the in-state schools. So that was the only that kind of that people around here don't really enjoy that discourse too much, but that is going to be my way to transition to a couple big picture Big Ten questions. We talked about
Yeah.
Nebraska a little bit. Obviously, the buzzwords in Chicago at their media day at Big Ten Media Day was getting old and staying old, and then obviously it's an 18 team league now, and everything that
Hmm.
comes with the additions of Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA. But then at the top, you've got Purdue, and then you've got kind of the team that I'm the most interested in this year, not just because I have connections to that staff. It's the Indiana Hoosiers, and I don't know if I have looked at a roster, looked at an entire situation that has felt more boom or bust, make or break than Indiana this season in quite some time. They obviously have the best, well, in their opinion, the best roster money can buy with how much they went all
True.
in the portal this year. But then they're still they're still Indiana basketball. And the question remains, can they shoot the ball? Which is not what you ever want to think if you're IU, I don't believe. So when you look at Mike Woodson's group, obviously with Balo and Miles Rice, they address a couple issues that were at the forefront last year. But does the idea of Balo and Renault and Mbako on the court all at the same time, like what is that? What feelings does that elicit from a basketball standpoint? And then just some general thoughts on IU.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid questions. When they went after Umar Balo, I thought, wow, this is interesting because there's been so much backlash towards Mike Woodson about his lack of 3-point shooting, the fact that it's archaic basketball, and what he inherited, right, with Race and Trace. It made
Mhm.
sense that they kind of played with these 4 or 5 guys who were more of a traditional big type setup, and it was Trace Jackson Davis's team and all that sort of stuff. So it made sense. So to go out and seek a guy like Balo, and then to know that Renew is probably your best player, and he also is very archaic. So now that's your 4 and your 5. Mbako's probably better playing the 4 than he is playing the 3, but just out of process of elimination, now he's at the 3. That front court, we're really relying on Mbako to take a leap from the outside. And yes, he did in the last 10 games. He did shoot the ball a lot better. They're obviously banking on that. And then, Trey Galloway, he should be a good shooter, but he's not. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he's the biggest trick of your eye you've ever seen because the shot looks good. Like if you don't see where the ball goes, if you just watch him, it looks like a good shot. But then you see the ball and you're like, that can't be the same cut. You know what I mean? This must be all cut up. So obviously Trey Galloway is nice to have his leadership role there. But they go get Miles Rice. What's the one knock on Miles Rice? He can't shoot the 3. They
Mhm.
go get Cannon Carlisle from Stanford. What's the one knock on Carlisle? He can't really shoot the 3. So it just feels like with this Indiana team, like you said, it is very much like we need a lot of things to fall into the right place. I think Luke Goody, who comes over, is someone that will be an asset for them. And I think he's going to end up having to start or at least play starter minutes. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of politicking that happens with the money that's been doled out to certain people and the expectation of certain guys. Mbako not being on the top 100 list from ESPN's draft guide or whatever. I think that probably rubs him the wrong way, and he's probably going to want to make some statements to let people know that he's still one of those guys. I find that ridiculous. I think he's a really talented kid. But in an ideal world, if you had Mbako at the 4 and Balo at the 5, and then we're able to have Carlisle, Miles Rice, Goody, Galloway, right? That to me makes a lot more sense as far as what would be good for this team and what would help with the spacing of this team. But again, Malik Renew is probably their best player when it just comes
Mhm.
down to like getting you a bucket, in a possession. So maybe they stagger Balo and Renew. Maybe that's the way that they do it. I'm fascinated. I think it's putting a lot of pressure on Mike Woodson to make a lot of lineup and rotation decisions. And that's going to be something that I think will be obviously analyzed and overanalyzed by Indiana fans who are very, this,
Mm.
very smart basketball people, right? So you can't get away with doing dumb things in front of IU fans because they're too smart. And again, I don't blame them for having high expectations because there's a lot of talent and a lot of money was handed out to guys to get them there. But there are a lot more questions than answers. That's a phrase that I continue to come back to with this Indiana team. And I understand like one tournament win in the last 8 seasons, that's not good enough. That's not Indiana basketball. It's not Mike Woodson's fault. 63-40. This will be his 4th year. I thought the hot seat talk last year was ridiculous. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was actually disrespectful to Mike Woodson. And I don't think it was coming from actual IU people. I think it was coming from some media people that, for whatever reason, have never liked Mike Woodson. They didn't like him when he got hired. They were disrespectful when he got hired. So I can understand the frustration, and that's why it kind of feels like a boiling point for IU fans right now. But this team, I just think like they're going to have to get to a point where it's like, I like Anthony Leal. Does he play? I like Gabe
Mhm.
Cups. Does he play? You know what I mean? Like there's guys on this team where it's like, where do they fit in, and where can will guys accept the fact that like I'm playing 7-10 minutes, or will they accept the fact that like Mike Woodson at some point is going to have to cut the rotation from 11 to 9 to 7. And when he gets to 7, who is the 7? You know what I mean? And if one of the 7, if one of the guys is not Malik Renew, who's supposed to be your number 1 usage guy, offensively at least, it just there's a lot there. And like you said, it has the capacity to explode. but it also has a lot of talent where, I mean, they're picked by some to win the Big Ten. So I hope for Woodson's sake that it kind of falls into place and Balo is able to help them get some easy baskets and some of those possessions that look like they're going nowhere. They can just get him the ball in the post and let him go to work. So I say all that to say that they need to speed up the tempo. They need to make more threes, and they need to figure out what the actual rotation is. And that's a lot on Mike Woodson, and I hope he figures it out.
Absolutely, and I've been saying for the last couple of years, I completely agree with you on Galloway's shooting. But if you were to design like the ideal Indiana basketball player in a lab, he looks like Trey Galloway. He
Right.
carries himself like Trey Galloway. The leadership, the hustle plays. He
Everything.
had
I mean, the first
everything.
time I
Like
saw Trey Galloway was at the Camping World Maui Invitational in Nashville. I was with Mark Titus, and Mark Titus, obviously, his dad is a IU guy, Coach Titus, and we're watching Trey Galloway in warmups, and this guy is just swishing threes, and it looks beautiful, like textbook, like left hand perfect, right hand follow through, beautiful. And I'm like, this guy's going to be a freaking star. And I had not seen him make threes like that since that one warm up session. So I don't know what it is. It might be a mental thing, but like you said, he's a guy that if they made an IU player in a lab, Trey Galloway's the guy.
And then to the hot seat stuff too. I think part of it also was it was kind of the perfect storm for that last year with the
Yeah,
rise of their in-state rival Purdue,
of course.
and there was some discourse in Big Ten circles about Braden Smith being the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. Like, what does that say about your league if an undersized white guy from Indiana who just through post feeds to Zach Edey for a year is your preseason Player of the Year? I don't think he'll be the postseason player of the year, but I mean, preseason prognostication is what it is for a reason. Purdue this year, like. I don't think they're gonna fall off a cliff as long as Painter's there and they bring so much back with guards and on the wings. But then it is kind of the only thing we're waiting on, like what their post rotations look like. They've really tried to make Trey Kaufman Wren happen. It's like Mean Girls, like stop trying to make fetch happen at some
Right.
points. Like they're really trying to do the Trey Kaufman Wren thing. And then Matt Painter still has the keys to the 7 foot white guy factory, and he's got two of them waiting in the wings to take up the mantle for Zach Edey.
Yeah, I think that is the fascinating, because it all comes down to the gravity of the situation, right? Where it's like Zach Edey's gravity towards the basket was able to give Braden Smith a lot of room to operate. But also, let's not discredit the fact that Braden Smith is a really good point guard and he has great vision. And I think his shot is actually underrated sometimes when people talk about his game. He's not afraid of anybody. I just kind of like the way he carries himself. That backcourt in general, I like the way that they carry themselves. Fletcher and Braden. This is the junior year that I kept saying when they were freshmen. Wait till their junior year, then I'll believe in these two guys. They were great last year with Edey. Fletcher had kind of fleeting moments, right? Sometimes he would be hot and be great. Sometimes he would just be a no-show. But I think Fletcher and Braden are good. But does Caleb First, invoke fear rolling to the basket? I don't think so. Does Trey Kaufman Wren? I don't think so. Daniel Jacobson is, 7'2", 7'3", nice freshman that they brought in. But by all accounts, I mean, Robbie Hummel said this when I was talking to him that he's just not there physically. They can't really trust to put him out on the floor. Maybe just as like a big 7-footer just to like throw people off a little bit, get them disoriented. But it's really putting a lot of pressure on First and Kaufman Wren to be really good. I'm kind of in the same camp as you. I need to see it from Kaufman Wren before I really buy into the whole hype of this thing. But my favorite player coming back is Cam Heide. I think Cam Heide is going to be a guy that takes that next step. So if those are your three guys, that 1, 2, and 3, Heide there at the 3, I like it. But I do think this is going to be more of a, Purdue is going to scrape through. They're going to be kind of like ranked in the 15 to 23 range throughout the season. Maybe they backdoor their way into a Big Ten tournament win or, a Big Ten tournament championship, or their top 3, top 4 in the league. But I don't think it's going to be obviously the domination that we saw a year ago, because it can't be, because Zach Edey was that much of a force. And it actually the math wouldn't add up if we're saying Zach Edey had to be the national. Like last year, we couldn't even have a national player of the year discourse. Every time I tried to have one, I have like random beat writers or random national people reaching out to me being like, don't disrespect Zach Edey. Zach Edey's the only, you know what I mean? And so if that's the case, right, then we have to say that obviously there's going to be a little bit of a drop off. But I do think Braden will have a really good year. I'm not sure he's going to be the player of the year, but he will be the driving force of this team. And I mean that quite literally. He's got to get downhill. He's got to, get to the basket and create some opportunities for other guys because they're going to need, Kaufman, Wren, First, Heidi, these guys to really step up. And I do think that they're going to miss guys like a Mason Gillis, just some of these like kind of older guys. You mentioned the mantra of we got to stay old. They do have 18 Purdue guys though, no transfers, which I do
Mhm.
like. So that's fun. I like that they can play big or small. But there's a lot of things that still need to be worked out with Purdue. But also, if they go back to the middle of the pack a little bit this year, no one's going to find fault in that because they just lost the back-to-back National Player of the Year.
I completely agree. So one more Big Ten thing, and then we can, I've got a few more, and we can wrap it up
Yeah,
a
of
little bit.
course.
The new crop of coaches in the Big Ten. You've got the West Coast coaches, first year guys, Musselman, Sprinkle, Dana Altman, just Teflon, just the
Yeah.
same. It feels like he's the same guy he was when he was at Creighton when I was a
Well,
little kid, and their
wasn't that
games
the
were.
best tournament game, by the way? Like the Dana
Mhm,
Altman game, Creighton versus Oregon, was the best game. Like I don't, and I know that obviously there was some more stakes to the other games, but
mhm,
that Kuznard game was
mhm.
incredible, and the fact that Creighton was able to figure out a way. I mean, I still go back to that game. So Dana Altman, he got even more respect from me after that one.
Absolutely, and then they're gonna play each other again in Vegas in the Players Era, the week of
That's right.
Thanksgiving. So
There you go.
Creighton fans are here. We go again. We can't escape Dana now. But I am really high on Dusty May at Michigan. I really like the offseason that they had. I know a lot of people traditionally think that was a dumpster fire. You can't flip a dumpster fire to being really good in 1 year with Portal and all these new guys. I'm really high on Dusty May. The Vlad Golden Danny Wolf combo. That's who they had at Big Ten Media Day. 2 7-foot big dudes who are very interior oriented. What do you like? Are you buying in on Dusty May at Michigan, either in the short term or the long term? And what? And do you get a kick out of the fact that Juwan Howard's son is still on the team at Michigan, which I learned recently that
Yeah.
he stuck around. He's still gonna stay and play for Dusty May.
I think that's really cool, and that's respect. I respect that Jawan wants him to be there and wants to stay connected to the program because, like, I mean, look at the Kenny Payne fiasco at Louisville. I mean, there will be no love lost between the program and the man moving
Mhm.
forward. You know what I mean? So it's nice after you go 8-24, 3-17, just a disaster. And for the way that Jawan was discussed early on in his tenure, you talk about going back to freezing cold takes. I mean, every single hire in that time period, it was like, can they be the next Jawan Howard? You know what I mean? So it's ridiculous how quickly things change. But I really like Dusty May. As you said, I like those 2 7-footers, the Jewish Joker, Danny Wolf. I think just a very cerebral, smart guy. Very Big Ten. You know what I mean? Like this
Oh
just
yeah.
feels like with those two guys, like they're just going to be able to muck up and win ugly games in the Big Ten. I can close my eyes and see them winning at Wisconsin right now, just with those two guys. Roddy Gale coming over from Ohio State, the ultimate trader. I think that's going to be fascinating to see what that looks like. I like Sam Walters, who they get from Alabama. I think he actually was underutilized at Alabama, but you have so much talent. I understand how that goes. So I think he'll be a name that stands out for this team. And you mentioned like the long term and the short term. Any term, I'm a fan of Dusty May. And, it's kind of interesting. Dusty May was very similar to Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino could have gotten the Michigan job when he was coming back from this. He got fired from the Celtics, and it was all signs he was going to Michigan. He's going to take the Michigan job. Then his wife talks him into the Louisville job, right? He ends up going to Louisville. Dusty May, it was all signs he's going to go to Louisville. Then, all of a sudden he gets, we don't know who talked him into it. I mean, probably the boosters at Michigan, but he gets talked in to go into Michigan. It's a bit of a foreign territory, but also Dusty May kind of just like fits like the Michigan mantra, the Michigan man, right? Hail to the victors. That whole MO that they have there, it just feels like a very Dusty May place to be. And I will feel really sorry for IU fans if Michigan is just kind of like this nice surprise in the Big Ten and Indiana is failing short of the expectations and they're saying, we should have hired Dusty May. You know what I mean? I feel like
Mhm.
there could be that sliding doors moment that could happen there. Obviously, Dusty May has his ties to Indiana. But yeah, I think this team could be a nice surprise. And I think my big prediction, and this is not even a bold prediction, I think they win more than 3 games in the conference. You know what I mean? I think we can say that, right? I mean, they're going to win more
Yep.
than 3 games, at least 5. So yeah, I
No,
like this team.
I completely agree. Yeah, that would be for IU fans. That would be the Squidward looking out the window meme if IU's
Oh
underachieving and
man.
Dusty Mays at Michigan, kind of doing
I
his thing.
I really feel for them. I mean, it would be like if Wes Miller took the Louisville job and Hubert was not doing great. As a North Carolina guy, and you're just watching someone that is your guy building another program at a school that has the type of. I mean, Michigan has history. They have their own things to kind of hang their hat on. So, yeah, I really will feel bad for IU fans. And to be honest, after I went to Bloomington, I just got a soft spot for Indiana in general because it reminds me of, the triangle in North Carolina. It's just like the people you can talk to a random person on the street about whatever on the basketball team. They'll tell you about the walk on. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm a big fan of him. He's, you're like, how do you know him? Well,
I
that's how
went
it
to all
goes.
his high school games. They were
Exactly.
appointment, yeah, like for
Right.
appointment.
Right.
I
Saw him at
had
New Albany High School. He's a good
yeah.
player.
I had former IU point guard, now the head coach at Ball State, Michael Lewis, on the show over the summer, and I asked him, I'm like,
Nice.
"What is it about basketball in Indiana? Like, is it just because basketball season it gets cold as hell and everyone needs to go inside, or like what is that? What like brings people together?" And he's like, "That's not a bad start, but it's just the state. Like, it's just ingrained
Yeah.
in the fabric of the state, and it's just it's." All the way from IU down to Ball State and Indiana State last year with shirts and high school
Right.
ball and everything. They've got the 49 states. It's just basketball and that whole thing that sounds corny as hell, but it's kind of true. It's
But
kind of
it's
true.
it's
The
why
more you dig into it.
they deserve like they deserve IU to be good. I mean, obviously it's great that Purdue is good. Obviously, IU fans don't want to hear that. It is good though. Like IU and Purdue should be like a Duke Carolina rivalry at this point. You know what I mean? Like they should have this animosity, but they should both be competing for championships. And I think that's all Indiana fans want. They just want to be in the fight. Right
Definitely.
now it feels like they're watching the fight and they're like trying to scrap and trying to be like, we'll get in, tag us in. And everyone's like, no, 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 you stay over there. So come on, IU, get in.
Yeah, we can hope, we can dream. All right, two more for you. When you're speaking of conferences, this is more general, big picture. The new Big 12 with the West
Yeah.
Coast schools. Then you've got the old kind of the old guard at the top. Bill is the old guard as long as Bill Self is there, and Kansas is the preseason #1 team in the country. But I feel like looking at the Big 12 with teams like KU and Iowa State and Baylor, it's kind of the old guard. You know what you're going to get from these teams. But in recent years, we've had the rise of SEC basketball to prominence in terms of like nationally and just depth. And think about the group of coaches in the SEC. Just how
Right.
how eclectic of a group that can be from Calipari to I mean, to down to Mark Pope, who's just a very normal dude, to Mark Byington at Vanderbilt. Like it's a pretty eclectic group. When in terms of depth, and quality of play from top to bottom this year, are you looking more toward the Big 12 or the SEC?
Oh, like between those two,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give the tip of the cap to the Big 12 just out of respect. But I understand, the SEC has the most teams in the AP preseason, top 25. It's nice when you add Texas to the mix. Texas is always going to get talent. It doesn't mean that the talent's going to deliver when it matters, but it does mean that it's going to be there. So I think, just in general, the SEC is fascinating. Like you said, you got a Todd Golden at Florida, who I think Florida with Walter Clayton is going to be a really good team. Maybe even under the radar at this point because there's so many other good teams in the SEC. Then you have Bruce Pearl, who is a man on a mission, who runs some of the best sideline out of bounds plays you'll ever see. I don't know where he gets them, probably from some Turkish team that, like when Dan Hurley was talking about that, I'm sure Bruce Pearl's in the same boat. Nate Oates, I think, is the second best coach in college basketball right now. I watched it firsthand out here at the regional against North Carolina when, he just basically never broke, right? Elliot Cadeau hit 2 threes early in that game. Most coaches would say, all right, let's change up our strategy here with him. Let's not go under. Let's figure something else out. He's just like, no, I don't balk. I'm not phased by it. Eventually it will come back and it will come back to roost. And then you just talk about the transfers that they brought in at Alabama. I mean, Aiden Holloway, I think, is very underrated. Mark Sears, preseason player of the year in my book. Dakota Durant, Grant Nelson back. Jaren Stevenson is one of my favorite players coming into his sophomore year. A guy who, reclassed and went up a class. So he's still like 18 going on 19. So yeah, the SEC is super deep, but I like Houston a lot. I think Houston is just going to always be there. It just is what it is. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Houston's in the Final Four and we're all like, oh, of course. Baylor is going to be a really fun team. I like the mix of Roach and O'Meara and then a VJ Edgecombe who comes in. I like those three guys. I like Robert Wright as well, the freshman that they brought in, a point guard. Kansas, I'm not a big Hunter Dickinson guy. I'm so confused why we don't believe the tape. You know what I mean? Like you've watched it,
Yep.
and you watched him at Michigan. I mean,
Yep.
you know what it is. So I'm still a little bit, hesitant to buy all the way into this whole Kansas idea and him being first team All-American. But I do like KJ Adams. I do like DeJuan Harris. I do like who they brought in and AJ Storr. I like Zeke Mayo a lot. So, I mean, they're obviously going to be super talented. I think Arizona is super talented. I think Caleb Love's going to have a really good year in the Big 12. Texas Tech is really good. I mean, really good. We're not talking about them enough. BYU has a freaking lottery pick that for whatever reason, nobody wants to talk about BYU and the fact that he was able, Kevin Young, to come in there and recruit Pope's guys back to BYU.
And a war chest of money. Not enough people are.
And a war chest of money. Like, I know that DeBonza had a price that he had told some teams, and then some teams had raised that money, and then BYU, I think, by all accounts, maybe they doubled the price. So, this is what we're dealing with. And then the last team that is almost like a forgotten afterthought, it seems, Iowa State. Iowa State is tough as shit, and they are defensively just a nightmare to deal with. And in college basketball, rebounding and defense typically get you to good places. And I think Iowa State is going to be. I mean, I think Iowa State will end up being the number one defense in the country this year. And I think Lipsey is going to be a guy that we're talking about as first team, second team, third team All-American type player. So that's why I would lean towards the Big 12, just because of like I myself, Cincinnati, I didn't even mention. As I go through it, I just get more and more like, holy shit, who's going to win this league and who's going to do this, who's going to do that. But the SEC has probably the best athletes and some of the best prospects, so they get obviously some recognition because of that. But I'll lean Big 12.
Yep, and one last Omaha reference. Shout out to my guy Latrell Retzel Jr. at Alabama. He went to my high school. There's a lot of Omaha guys spread throughout college basketball this year. So we can end on this. You mentioned Kansas and not being a fan of Hunter Dickinson. Will you be making the trip to
It's
Allen
not personal,
Fieldhouse?
by the way.
No.
It's not personal. Like, I think Hunter, like, I feel like he's like, everyone hates me. He does this whole kind of sad
When he
act,
showed up to the Kohl Center in the Shiesty mask, that was when I kind of flipped on that as well.
Right. I'm just
But
talking about a basketball standpoint. Like
Yep.
I've seen Armando Bacot dominate. I've seen him get dominated by other bigs and him kind of no show, and that's more of my concern. But yes, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't. You know what I mean? I'm scared of Hunter Dickinson trying to fight me. He's 7'2". I don't want to deal with that.
Well, this plays into the question. Maybe he would try to fight you. Are you going to
Right.
make the trip to Allen Fieldhouse on
Yes.
November 8th to watch your
That
Tar
is-
Heels take on KU?
That will be my first time down there in Lawrence, Kansas. Yes, I am making the trip. I will be there. I want to take Kyle, my producer Kyle, with me, but I think he's been told he can't go, or he's not allowed to go, or something. I don't know. He's got some sort of, it's like a no-fly rule with Kyle. So I don't think I'm going to be able to bring him. I do have some friends that are going. I'm debating if I go as media. You know what I mean? It's kind of this fine line. I'm one of the few people that I'm not afraid to let you know that, like, I went to North Carolina and that's a team I love, but I also have no problem covering them. And, I did it when I was in college. But I like just going as a fan and be able to watch as a fan. When you're on media row, like, there's all the other media people. There's a lot of like jockeying for position, a lot of peacocking, a lot of where's your seat? Oh, mine's right here in front. You know what I mean? That whole game, which I'm not that guy. I just find that to be very pedantic. Is probably the right word for it. But I will be there. I will be in the building. We'll decide if I'm going to be wearing a suit and be in media, or if I'm going to be wearing my North Carolina blue and having a good time. But by all accounts, all the Kansas people that I met and dealt with at the 2022 Final Four, great people, great basketball fans, great minds about the game of basketball. basketball. The 2022 Final Four was awesome because it was like Carolina, Villanova, North Carolina, like the three of us all were just having like, kind of like a respect off, you know what I mean? It's like, man, I respect you guys. I respect you guys. I respect you guys. And then it was like Duke fans who were like talking about continuation. We're like, that's not a rule in college basketball. You twerps, you know what I mean? Shut up. Stop it. So it was a very fun Final Four, and I felt like we broke bread. Obviously, it broke my heart to see Carolina blow a 16-point lead. So this will be a 2022 title game rematch, and they'll be playing the number one team in the country. So it'll be probably number 9, number 8, depending on what poll you look at. Coaches or AP taking on the number one team in the country. So couldn't ask for a better setting, and I'm excited to get there. I've never been to Lawrence, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, I can't recommend that place enough, man. I got the hookup a couple years ago when
Nice.
Indiana went down there and got their asses handed to them, and I somehow wound up
That's what I'm
sitting.
worried about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
Carolina
well,
has a proclivity to get their ass handed to them when they go to like a fellow blue blood. Like, look at the Assembly Hall, trips. It's just like getting beat by 30 points. I'm so glad I didn't go to that game, but
yeah, no,
that's my
can't.
concern.
Yeah, I can't recommend that place enough though, man. Like, do the whole thing. Go to the museum, look at the
Right.
rules of basketball, the whole like KU history tour, that whole thing, and they are good people. They'll treat you well. There's
Right.
an outside chance I'm in the building too. I'm trying to pull some
All right.
strings to surprise a friend of mine who's a KU grad for their birthday coming up. So trying to pull some strings to make that happen, and we might have to connect if we're in the same building. But
Of
Tate,
course.
I
Let's do it.
cannot. I cannot thank you enough for coming on, man. This has been a really cool moment for me. Thanks for coming on, talking ball. Great to connect, and hopefully we can do this again sometime, man. I appreciate it.
We'll do it again. I won't make you wait a month. I apologize again. And yeah, if you're in Lawrence, I'll be there. We'll connect, and hopefully we get a good game. That's all I can hope for. You know what I mean? I'm not saying Carolina has to win. I just want some good basketball to watch, and we're so close to it. So appreciate you, man.
Big thanks again to Tate Frazier for taking the time to hop on the show, chop it up, talk a little basketball. Who knows? Maybe I'll see him at Allen Fieldhouse in a couple weeks. That would be pretty cool when the Kansas North Carolina game comes up. But that was really fun. Just look around college basketball. There's plenty of storylines, things to look forward to, teams to watch, players to watch, old faces and new places in the coaching ranks. And there's plenty. There's plenty to like, plenty to look forward to. It is still secret scrimmage season, closed door scrimmage, charity exhibition season. On the Nebraska side, Nebraska did travel to Salt Lake City this past weekend to take on Utah. They fell 75-73 in the secret scrimmage at the John Huntsman Center out in Salt Lake City. I will say I have been given some information on how that game went, and uh, I'll have some info on the next edition of the pod, talking Nebraska, Utah. It's like I said on the previous episode, talking about the inner squad. You got to take these things with a grain of salt. And like Juwan Gary said at Big Ten Media Day, it's called preseason for a reason. But next weekend, Sunday the 27th, Nebraska plays an exhibition game against Grand Valley State at Pinnacle Bank Arena, and then we will be even closer than we were before to the start of college basketball season. So looking forward to these next coming weeks. May even have another announcement coming of another show that I'll be a part of. Possibly following games throughout this basketball season. So stay tuned for that. If this is your first time tuning in, you follow the show on your podcast platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Really appreciate anyone who subscribes, follows, leaves a review. Really helps me out. We've seen a lot of growth this off season, and we're ramping it up for the start of what should be another really fun basketball season. You can follow the show on social media, Twitter at Stretch Big Pod, no spaces. Follow me on there at Jacob A. Bigelow. You can even watch the show on YouTube. Shout out to my friends at Husker Max. The video version of the podcast is going to be up on their YouTube channel throughout the season. If you feel like watching my goofy mug talk hoops for the year, I've got a nice pod backdrop. I mean, I've got a nice backdrop. Tim Miles said it was nice. Michael Lewis said it was nice. It's gotten some rave reviews. So you can tune into there on YouTube if video is your preferred method for podcast. But it's going to be a fun next couple weeks. We'll have a shorter episode coming with what I learned about the Nebraska Utah secret scrimmage. And then we'll kind of have a roster deep dive breakdown, my general thoughts on the season, where I see it going. That'll be out, I don't know when, but before the season opener on November 4th against UT Rio Grande Valley in Lincoln, hoping to wrangle a guest for that as well, so we can have multiple voices looking at the roster, looking at the season, and looking at the Big Ten. So appreciate everyone for tuning in. Big thanks again to Tate Frazier. Great to connect with him. Really cool moment for me. Continues kind of a awesome hot streak of guests for the show, and it's not even basketball season yet. So who knows where we'll go from here. But big thanks again to everybody, and we will talk again soon.